Throughout history, some celebrity deaths have been as shocking as they are tragic, especially when caused by animals. From wild encounters gone wrong to fatal accidents in seemingly controlled environments, these incidents remind us of nature's raw power. Here are some of the most horrifying celebrity deaths caused by animals. In February 2010, SeaWorld Orlando was buzzing with excitement. Families with kids clutching cotton candy and cameras were there to see the star attractions. Massive orcas leaping gracefully out of the water, soaking everyone in the splash zone. Among the trainers, Dawn Brancheau was the shining figure. With her trademark ponytail, warm smile, and years of experience, she wasn't just another trainer. She was one of SeaWorld's most seasoned performers and a favorite among visitors. Her job wasn't just about feeding fish to these enormous creatures. It was about building a bond, a relationship of trust with animals that weighed as much as a bus. And on that day, her stage partner was none other than Tilikum, SeaWorld's largest orca and, as it turned out, one of its most infamous. The show began like any other. Tilikum swam gracefully, showing off tricks and splashing the crowd. After the main performance, Dawn stayed behind for what was supposed to be a calmer, more intimate moment called Dine with Shamu. Here, guests could watch trainers interact with the whales while enjoying their meals. Dawn leaned over, rubbing Tilikum's head, guiding him through gentle behaviors. It was routine, almost second nature to her. But within seconds, routine turned into chaos. Tilikum lunged and grabbed her. Some witnesses claimed by her ponytail, others by her arm or shoulder, but the result was the same. He pulled her into the water with terrifying force, and what followed was a horrifying struggle witnessed by guests, staff, and even children. Trainers scrambled, throwing nets and attempting to distract him, but the sheer size and power of the animal made rescue impossible. Tilikum dove, resurfaced, and thrashed about, holding Dawn beneath the water again and again. By the time SeaWorld staff managed to move him into a smaller medical pool and retrieve her body, it was too late. Dawn had suffered drowning and catastrophic injuries, including broken bones, spinal damage, and blunt force trauma. The tragedy sent shockwaves through SeaWorld and beyond. Dawn wasn't just an employee, she was a beloved trainer, someone who embodied the dream of working with these magnificent creatures. Guests who had admired her that day left traumatized, and the public soon began asking uncomfortable questions. Should orcas, highly intelligent and social animals, really be kept in captivity? Was the danger to trainers underestimated for the sake of entertainment? And perhaps, most hauntingly, had this been preventable? Tilikum already had a history, and not a minor one. He had been involved in the death of a trainer in Canada in 1991 and another incident in 1999 when a man who snuck into his pool was found dead the next morning. Dawn's death was the third and most public in a series of red flags that seemed impossible to ignore. The reality was that Tilikum's behavior was not completely unpredictable, and the risks had been known for years. Yet shows continued because he was also one of the most valuable whales in the park. His massive size and commanding presence made him a crowd favorite, but that same size was what made him nearly impossible to control once he decided to act on his own terms. In the aftermath, SeaWorld made sweeping changes. Trainers no longer performed water stunts alongside orcas, and new safety protocols were introduced. But the impact went far beyond one company's policy adjustments. Dawn's death became the catalyst for a much larger conversation about the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity. Documentaries like Blackfish took her story and Tilikum's history and presented them to the world, igniting outrage, protests, and calls for reform. Public sentiment began to shift, attendance at marine parks dropped, and even legislation was proposed to ban orca breeding programs. For Dawn's family, friends, and colleagues, the loss was deeply personal and devastating. For SeaWorld, it was transformative, forcing them to change how they operated and eventually leading to the decision to phase out orca shows altogether. For the world, it was a sobering reminder of the raw power of nature and the ethical dilemmas of trying to bend it to human entertainment. Dawn Brancheau's legacy lives on, not only as a gifted trainer who loved her animals, but as a symbol of why respect for the wild should always come before spectacle. Timothy Treadwell was not just another visitor to Alaska's Katmai National Park. He was a man who dedicated 13 summers of his life to living among grizzly bears, observing them, filming them, and advocating for their protection. What set him apart was the extraordinary closeness he allowed himself with these powerful predators. While most wildlife experts stress the importance of keeping a safe distance, Treadwell placed himself right in the middle of bear territory, often just a few feet away from animals that could end his life in seconds. His intentions came from a place of passion. He loved these animals deeply and believed that by documenting them up close, he could inspire people to care about their survival. But in blurring the line between respect and overfamiliarity, Treadwell was constantly walking a razor's edge between admiration and danger. Over the years, his work gained both praise and criticism. On one hand, his footage captured grizzly behavior with raw intimacy. He filmed cubs playing, bears foraging, and interactions that few had ever witnessed so closely. His narration reflected his almost childlike wonder and emotional bond with the animals. On the other hand, park rangers and biologists warned that his behavior was reckless and potentially harmful, both to him and to the bears. By approaching them so fearlessly, he risked habituating them to human presence, a dangerous precedent that could lead to future conflicts. Treadwell dismissed these warnings, believing he had built a mutual trust with his bears. He spoke of them as friends, even protectors, insisting that his presence was welcomed in their world. Yet, the wilderness is not ruled by sentiment. Grizzly bears, despite their majesty and beauty, remain wild animals governed by instinct and survival. In October 2003, at the end of what would be his final season in Katmai, Treadwell returned with his girlfriend, Amy Huguenard. They camped later in the season than usual, a time when bears grow hungrier and more aggressive in preparation for winter hibernation. It was a decision that would prove fatal. One night, a bear entered their campsite. Treadwell and Huguenard were attacked and killed in a violent mauling. Disturbingly, Treadwell's video camera was on during the incident, but with the lens cap still on, leaving behind an audio recording of the struggle. The tape, which captured their final moments, was never made public, but its existence has been widely discussed, adding an unsettling layer to the tragedy. The bear, believed responsible, was later located and killed by park rangers. The aftermath of Treadwell's death sparked intense debate. Was he a fearless protector who gave his life for the animals he loved? Or was he a reckless dreamer whose disregard for boundaries put both himself and others in danger? Werner Herzog's 2005 documentary Grizzly Man explored this question by weaving together Treadwell's own footage with interviews from those who knew him. Herzog's perspective leaned toward the harsh reality of nature's indifference, showing how Treadwell's romantic view of harmony between man and predator clashed with the unforgiving laws of the wild. The film portrayed him as a man driven by both passion and denial, a visionary to some and a cautionary tale to others. Today, Timothy Treadwell remains a polarizing figure. His footage continues to captivate audiences, giving an unparalleled look into the lives of Alaskan grizzlies. At the same time, his story is a sobering reminder of the limits of human idealism when faced with raw wilderness. His love for the bears was unquestionable, but it also blinded him to the reality that wild animals cannot be tamed by affection. In the end, his legacy is both inspiring and tragic. He opened the world's eyes to the beauty of grizzlies while demonstrating, in the most devastating way possible, why the boundary between humans and wild predators must never be ignored. When you think of royal deaths, you might imagine assassination plots, battlefield heroics, or political conspiracies. What you probably do not imagine is monkeys. Yet in 1920, Greece's King Alexander I, a young monarch caught between wars and dynasties, met his end not from enemies with swords or bullets, but from an oddly ordinary walk in his palace gardens. It all began at Tatoi Palace, a sprawling royal estate near Athens where Alexander lived in relative isolation, cut off from politics but still bound by the burdens of kingship. On October 2nd, he took his German shepherd out for a stroll, something completely ordinary for a 27-year-old king. What happened next would shake both the monarchy and Greece itself. As Alexander walked, his dog ran into trouble. 2 pet monkeys, kept on the estate by a caretaker, suddenly attacked the dog. What might have been a small scuffle between animals quickly escalated into chaos. The king rushed in to defend his loyal companion, trying to pull the monkeys away. In the struggle, one monkey bit his leg while the other clamped down on his hand. It was not a life-threatening attack at the moment. After all, bites happen, and Alexander reportedly dismisses the wounds as minor. But sometimes history turns on details so small they almost feel unbelievable. In this case, those little bites would soon prove catastrophic. The cuts became infected, and medicine in 1920 did not have the answers it has today. Antibiotics like penicillin would not be discovered until years later, so the doctors could do little more than clean, bandage, and hope. Instead of healing, the infection spread. Within days, Alexander developed a raging case of sepsis, blood poisoning that even now can be deadly. His condition deteriorated quickly, and what began as a bizarre encounter in the gardens became a national crisis. For 3 weeks, doctors tried to save him, even amputating tissue to stop the spread. Nothing worked. On October 25, 1920, King Alexander I died at just 27 years old, taken down by a freak accident with monkeys while trying to save his dog. His death was more than just a tragic footnote. It had enormous political consequences. Alexander had been placed on the throne in 1917 after his father, King Constantine, was forced into exile during World War I under Allied pressure. The young king had little political power of his own and was often seen as a placeholder, a monarch without full control of his destiny. When he died suddenly and without an heir, the question of succession reignited fierce debates. Within weeks, Constantine the Führer's returned to the throne, a decision that altered Greece's role in the post-war years and influenced its disastrous campaign in Asia Minor. In other words, the bite of 2 monkeys may have shifted the course of an entire nation. There is a strange irony to the whole affair. A king who had no say in his coronation, who reigned in the shadow of his father in the Great War, ended up losing his life not on a battlefield, but in his own garden, caught in the middle of a fight between a dog and a pair of monkeys. Historians often call it one of the most bizarre deaths in royal history, and it is hard to argue otherwise. It reads almost like dark satire, a reminder that for all their crowns and titles, kings are still human, vulnerable to the smallest accidents of life. Alexander's death is sometimes overshadowed by the political turbulence that followed, but it stands as a story equal parts tragic and absurd, a tale of loyalty to a dog, the dangers of underestimating small wounds, and the unpredictable turns of history. Catherine Kate Chappelle's story is one that feels almost unreal, the kind of headline you double-check to see if it is true, and then sit in stunned silence when you realize it is. Here was a 29-year-old rising star in Hollywood's visual effects world, someone who had worked on blockbuster films like Captain America, The Winter Soldier, and even earned credits on the phenomenon that was Game of Thrones. She had a brilliant career in front of her, a reputation for hard work and creativity, and, above all, a sense of adventure that took her beyond the editing room and out into the world. That adventurous spirit, however, tragically collided with one of nature's most powerful creatures in 2015, when she was killed by a lioness at South Africa's Lion Park. It is one of those incidents that reminds us how thin the line can be between admiration of wildlife and the danger it poses when boundaries are crossed. On June 1, 2015, Chappelle was touring the Lion Park just outside Johannesburg. It was not her first trip to South Africa, as her friends and family said she was passionate about conservation and deeply interested in wildlife, which made the safari an experience that fit her personality perfectly. But safaris come with rules, and one of the most important is deceptively simple. Keep the windows up. The park has signs everywhere. The guides repeat it to every visitor, and the rule exists for the very reason you might expect Because lions are not fluffy cats lounging in the sun. They are apex predators that can strike in a split second. Unfortunately, in a moment that proved fatal, Chappelle rolled down her window to take photos of the animals. Within seconds, a 9-year-old lioness lunged at the opening, sinking her teeth into Chappelle and delivering a wound so severe that she could not be saved, despite the desperate efforts of park staff and paramedics. What followed was a swirl of shock, grief, and controversy. Chappelle's family and friends were left to mourn a young woman whose life was defined by talent, kindness, and an unstoppable drive to see the world. Meanwhile, questions quickly arose about the safety practices at Lion Park. The park management insisted that their warnings are clear and unambiguous, telling visitors to never roll down their windows in the lion enclosure. They even said their staff rushed in immediately after the attack, using distractions and physical barriers to force the lion back while trying to administer first aid. But the tour operator, who had been driving Chappelle that day, suggested the park's version was incomplete and that more could have been done to help. The disagreements only added another layer of tension to a tragedy that had already stunned people worldwide. In the end, the facts were stark. Kate Chappelle rolled down her window, and the lioness did what lions do. It is a haunting reminder of why rules exist in places where humans and predators interact. Unlike the safety of a film set, where Chappelle had spent much of her career conjuring illusions of danger through visual effects, the threat she faced that day was all too real and impossible to edit away. And perhaps the cruelest irony is that she was not someone who treated wildlife carelessly. She had come to South Africa not just as a tourist, but as someone genuinely invested in conservation and fighting poaching. Her intentions were good, her passion genuine, but a single choice in the wrong setting proved fatal. Chappelle's death still resonates because it symbolizes both the allure and the peril of the wild. Safaris offer people the thrill of being close to magnificent animals, but they also demand respect for the rules that separate wonder from disaster. For Kate, whose work brought dragons and battlefields to life on screen, her final chapter was written by nature itself, swift, brutal, and unforgettable. And while her story is heartbreaking, it also serves as a sobering lesson. When it comes to lions, the boundary between observer and prey is literally just a pane of glass. Jackie Boxberger's life was defined by running, but it ended in a way that nobody could have predicted. Not on a track, not even in a marathon, but deep in the wilds of Kenya. Born in 1949 in the Vosges region of France, Boxberger was a natural athlete from the start. By the late 1960s, he was already competing with the best in the world, representing France in the 1500 meters at the Mexico City Olympics when he was just 19. Over the next 2 decades, he would become one of the most recognizable names in French athletics, a specialist in middle and long-distance events who could hold his own, whether on the track or on the roads. He won the European indoor title over 1500 meters in 1972, ran in 4 separate Olympic Games, and later transitioned into marathon running, claiming victories in major races, including the Paris Marathon. For French distance running, he was one of the greats, a figure who inspired a generation and carried the nation's colors with pride. Yet Boxberger's life was never just about medals and times. He had the kind of charisma that drew people in, and his career had its share of highs and lows, the kind that make a story richer. Injuries and fierce competition meant he never stood on an Olympic podium, but he remained admired for his consistency, his longevity, and his refusal to give up the sport he loved. Even in retirement, athletics was in his blood. He passed that spirit on to his daughter Ophélie, who followed her father into competitive running. Family, adventure, and athletics were the core themes of his life until a holiday safari in 2001 turned it all upside down. In August of that year, Boxberger was in Kenya with his wife and daughter, traveling through Tsavo East National Park. Yeah, it should have been a beautiful trip, a chance to experience wildlife in its natural habitat, far away from the regimented world of training schedules and stopwatch timings. Instead, it became the final chapter of his story. According to reports, Boxberger had gotten out of his vehicle to film or photograph elephants, a scene that many tourists might find irresistible. But African elephants are not passive subjects. They are massive, unpredictable, and capable of sudden aggression. In this case, a female elephant charged. Witnesses said she lifted Boxberger with her trunk, threw him against a tree, and then trampled him. It was quick, brutal, and tragically final. His family, including his daughter, could only watch as the horrifying scene unfolded. The news shocked both the athletics community and the public at large. Here was a man who had outrun some of the world's best, who had built a reputation on endurance and strength, only to meet his end in such a violent and unexpected manner. The irony of it struck many observers. After decades of testing his body against the limits of human performance, it was not injury, illness, or age that defeated him, but the sheer power of nature. It was a reminder of how fragile life is, no matter how strong, fast, or accomplished a person may be. Boxberger's death was more than just a headline about a safari accident. For French athletics, it was the loss of a pioneer, a man who had helped bring visibility and credibility to long-distance running in the country. For his family, it was the loss of a husband and father in circumstances almost too shocking to process. And for those who heard the story, it was a cautionary tale about the unpredictability of wild animals and the dangers of underestimating them. His legacy, though, did not end in Kenya. His records, his victories, and his influence on younger generations of athletes continued to live on. Even today, when people recall French running history, the name Jackie Boxberger still resonates, carrying both the triumphs of the track and the tragedy of the savannah.